In the year 2004, the world of archaeology was quietly, but fundamentally, shaken. It didn't happen during a multi-million-dollar government expedition. It didn't happen using ground-penetrating radar or satellite imagery. It happened in a small, unremarkable backyard in the dusty city of Nushabad, located in the central desert of Iran. A local man was simply digging a sewage pit for his home. As his shovel struck the earth, it didn't meet the expected resistance of packed clay and bedrock. Instead, the ground simply gave way. The earth collapsed inward, revealing a dark, perfectly carved, stone-lined shaft leading straight down into an abyss. When local authorities and, eventually, stunned archaeologists arrived to investigate, they peered into that void and saw something that defied all logic. They hadn't just found a forgotten cellar or a natural cave system. They had stumbled upon the entrance to a sprawling, multi-leveled subterranean metropolis. A massive, complex labyrinth stretching for miles beneath the surface, featuring engineering so unbelievably advanced that it immediately threw the scientific community into a state of profound confusion. This is the underground city of Ouyi, better known as the Nushabad complex. But the more scientists explore this subterranean world, the less sense it makes. How did a civilization, supposedly armed with nothing but primitive copper and iron pickaxes, manage to carve millions of tons of unyielding bedrock with the surgical precision of a modern boring machine? Why is there a constant, perfectly chilled breeze circulating through tunnels 60 feet underground without a single mechanical fan or power source? And why, according to whispered reports from geological survey teams, do modern GPS trackers, sonar devices, and even simple compasses begin to malfunction the moment they pass through these ancient stone thresholds? Today, we are going to leave the world of the sun behind. We are descending into the forbidden tunnels of Iran that seemingly appeared out of nowhere. We will examine the impossible engineering, the terrifying traps left behind in the dark, and the chilling reasons why some researchers believe these tunnels were not built to protect people from invading armies, but to hide them from a global cataclysm that wiped out a highly advanced, forgotten civilization. To truly understand the sheer impossibility of the Nushabad tunnels, we must first understand the brutal, unforgiving environment of the Iranian plateau. Iran is a land of terrifying extremes. In the summer, the nearby Dasht-e-Lut desert registers ground temperatures that can exceed 159 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to literally fry biological matter. In the winter, the biting winds sweeping off the Zagros Mountains can plunge the region into freezing darkness. For thousands of years, the mainstream historical narrative has taught us that the ancient Persians were masters of surface architecture. They built the magnificent Persepolis. They built towering ziggurats. But the discovery of Nushabad proves that we only knew half the story. They were not just masters of the Earth's surface, they were masters of the deep void. Imagine a city built entirely in reverse. Instead of erecting towers that reach for the sky, the architects of Nushabad plunged deep into the planetary crust. This is not a series of crude, haphazardly dug caves. This is a highly organized, three-story fortress buried up to 18 meters, nearly 60 feet, underground. When the first survey teams bravely descended through that sewage pit in 2004, they expected to find a few small chambers, perhaps a temporary hideout. What they found instead was a technological ghost haunting the ancient rock. Let us walk through what those archaeologists experienced. As you lower yourself into the first level, the blistering heat of the Iranian desert immediately vanishes. The temperature drops to a stable, comfortable 65 degrees Fahrenheit. You find yourself in a narrow corridor. The ceiling is deliberately low, forcing anyone taller than 5'6" to stoop slightly. The walls are not rough or jagged. They are remarkably smooth, showing a terrifyingly consistent excavation method. The complex is divided into 3 distinct levels. The first level, closest to the surface, features winding corridors and small rooms. The second level plunges deeper, housing massive storage chambers, gathering halls, and intricate defensive choke points. The third level, the deepest and most mysterious, connects directly to underground aquifers and the legendary Qanat water system. It is here, in the engineering of these tunnels, that modern scientists begin to scratch their heads in disbelief. Let's talk about the first impossible hurdle, the excavation itself. The bedrock beneath Nushabad is incredibly dense. To create a multi-level city covering an estimated area of over 4 acres, the builders had to remove hundreds of thousands of cubic meters of solid rock. If you were to do this today, you would need a fleet of diesel-powered excavators, hydraulic drills, and dynamite. You would also need a massive logistical operation to transport the debris away from the site. Yet, There are no historical records of such an operation. And more bafflingly, the displaced earth, millions of tons of rock and soil, has never been found. It is an archaeological magic trick. Where did the dirt go? You cannot simply hide a mountain of excavated bedrock in a flat desert. Some fringe researchers have pointed out that the smoothness of the tunnel walls doesn't show the expected chipping marks of hand tools. Instead, in certain deeper sections, the stone looks almost as if it was melted or softened. This has led to highly controversial theories of vitrification, suggesting the builders possessed technology capable of superheating rock, essentially turning the walls to glass and vaporizing the excavated material. While mainstream geologists dismiss this, arguing the smooth walls are the result of centuries of water erosion, they still cannot answer the fundamental question: where is the rubble? But the missing dirt is just the beginning of the mystery. The true genius of Nushabad, and the aspect that completely baffles modern mechanical engineers, is its life support system. At 60 feet underground, in a complex labyrinth housing thousands of people, oxygen deprivation should kill everyone within hours. Carbon dioxide, being heavier than air, naturally sinks and pools in low, enclosed spaces. A 3-story underground city should be a mass grave of suffocated citizens. Yet, the air in Nushabad is fresh. How? The ancient builders designed a thermodynamic ventilation system so perfect that it operates on pure physics, requiring zero energy. They carved a series of U-shaped and P-shaped vertical shafts connecting the surface to the deepest levels. By calculating the exact difference in atmospheric pressure and temperature between the desert above and the caverns below, they created a perpetual vacuum effect. The hot wind blowing across the surface creates low pressure at the mouth of the shafts, which literally sucks the heavy, toxic carbon dioxide out of the deep chambers. Simultaneously, cooler, oxygen-rich air is drawn down through separate intake shafts, often routed over underground water streams to naturally air condition it. Modern fluid dynamics software was required for scientists to fully map and understand how this airflow works. The exactness of the shaft diameters, their angles, and their placement across 4 acres of underground real estate requires an understanding of aerodynamics that humanity supposedly didn't invent until the 19th century. To say this was done by trial and error is an insult to logic. The builders had a profound mathematical understanding of physics. Then we come to the water. A city cannot survive without water, especially in the desert. The 3rd level of Nushabad intersects with a Qanat. For those unfamiliar, a Qanat is an ancient underground aqueduct. But aqueduct is too simple a word. It is a gently sloping subterranean tunnel that taps into the water table of a distant mountain, bringing fresh, glacial meltwater across miles of desert entirely underground to prevent evaporation. To build a Qanat, you have to calculate the exact gradient of the slope. If the water flows too fast, it will erode the tunnel walls, causing a collapse. If it flows too slow, it will stagnate and become toxic. The gradient must be mathematically perfect over a distance of sometimes 20 or 30 miles. They achieved this underground, in pitch blackness, without GPS, without laser levels, and without modern surveying equipment. In Nushabad, this massive water network was seamlessly integrated into the deepest level of the city, providing an endless supply of fresh, freezing water to the inhabitants. But who were these inhabitants hiding from? The official, textbook explanation is that Nushabad was built during the Sassanid Empire, roughly 1,500 years ago, as a refuge. The region was a crossroads for invading armies: the Romans, the Mongols, various marauding tribes. When an invading army approached, the entire population of the city above would vanish into the earth, taking their livestock, food, and wealth with them. And they did not go down there to be sitting ducks. The tunnels of Nushabad are a masterclass in psychological and physical warfare. As archaeologists mapped the complex, they found that it was entirely rigged with lethal defense mechanisms. Imagine being an invading Mongol soldier. You discover a hidden entrance and descend into the dark with a torch. Immediately, you are forced to walk in single file because the corridors are designed to be exactly the width of one man. You cannot swing a sword. You are forced to stoop, making you vulnerable. Suddenly, the tunnel forks. You choose the left path. A few feet in, the floor drops out from under you. You plunge into a spiked pit hidden in the shadows. Let's say you survive that. You keep walking. You encounter a massive circular stone door, weighing several tons. These doors were designed on a pivot mechanism that could only be operated from the inside. Once rolled into place, it merged perfectly with the rock wall. From the outside, it looked like a dead end. But the traps get even more devious. The builders understood human psychology and optics. In the flickering light of a torch, shadows dance. The corridors of Nushabad feature false doorways and dead ends that lead nowhere. They designed choke points, where defenders could pour boiling oil or drop rocks through tiny murder holes in the ceiling onto the trapped invaders below. Even the bathrooms were weaponized. The toilet shafts were dug incredibly deep, but they were also strategically placed. If an invader tried to crawl through the ventilation or waste shafts, they would find themselves funneled into enclosed chambers where the defenders could simply seal the doors and let the invaders suffocate in the dark. But as we look closer at these defenses, the refuge from invaders theory starts to show cracks. Why would you build a city designed to hold thousands of people for months on end just to hide from a passing army? Armies in the ancient world could not lay siege to a barren desert for long. They lacked the supply lines. The people of Nushabad could have simply fled to the mountains. Digging a 4-acre, 60-foot-deep underground complex requires a multi-generational commitment. It is the work of a society that planned to live underground permanently. This brings us to the anomalies, the things that scientists whisper about at conferences but rarely publish in academic journals. The first anomaly is acoustic. There are specific chambers within the second level of Nushabad that completely deaden sound. If you stand in the center of one of these circular rooms and clap your hands, there is no echo. The sound is immediately swallowed by the walls. If you stand 2 feet away from a colleague and shout, they will hear your voice as a muffled whisper. Acoustic engineers who have visited the site are baffled. The walls are not padded with organic material. They are solid, raw rock. Yet, the specific geometry of the ceiling, combined with microscopic grooving on the walls, creates an acoustic black hole. Why? Was this a chamber for secret councils where nothing could be overheard? Was it a sensory deprivation room for religious rituals? Or, as some darker theories suggest, was it a chamber designed to muffle the screams of something, or someone, kept in the deep? The second anomaly is electromagnetic. Deep in the third level, near the subterranean water channels, research teams have reported bizarre equipment failures. High-end digital cameras suddenly drain their batteries from full to zero in seconds. Compasses spin wildly, completely unable to find magnetic north. Ground-penetrating radar returns erratic, chaotic signals, as if the rock itself is buzzing with interference. Mainstream geologists brush this off, attributing the phenomena to high concentrations of magnetic iron ore or telluric currents, natural electric currents running through the Earth's crust. But independent researchers point to something more profound. In ancient Persian alchemy and Zoroastrian mysticism, the Earth was viewed as a living, breathing entity crisscrossed with dragon lines, currents of vast, invisible energy. Did the builders of Nushabad map these energy currents? Did they build their city on a massive electromagnetic nexus to harness this power? When you look at the floor plan of Nushabad from above, the intricate right-angled corridors and the circular nodes do not look like a typical ancient city. They look terrifyingly similar to the schematic of a modern computer motherboard, an integrated circuit carved in stone. Are we looking at a giant machine whose purpose we have long forgotten? This leads us to the most controversial paradigm-shifting theory of all, the Pre-Diluvian hypothesis. There is a growing faction of alternative historians who believe that the dating of Nushabad and similar underground cities across the world is fundamentally flawed. We date these tunnels based on the pottery and bones found inside them. But finding a 1,500-year-old clay pot in a stone tunnel does not mean the tunnel was built 1,500 years ago. It simply means someone used the tunnel 1,500 years ago. Stone cannot be carbon dated. The bedrock itself is millions of years old. What if Nushabad is not from the Sassanid era? What if it is 10,000 or even 15,000 years old? Let's look at the global context. Nushabad is not an isolated phenomenon. Just across the border in Turkey lies the underground city of Derinkuyu in the Cappadocia region. Derinkuyu is even larger, an 18-story underground complex capable of housing 20,000 people along with their livestock. Like Nushabad, it features perfect ventilation, massive rolling stone doors, and deep wells. In fact, some researchers believe that Derinkuyu and Nushabad might actually be connected by an unmapped transcontinental subterranean highway. Why would human beings across the Middle East, thousands of years ago, suddenly decide to abandon the surface and burrow deep into the earth? Every major ancient culture on Earth shares a remarkably similar myth. The Great Cataclysm, the story of a time when the heavens rained fire, the oceans rose to swallow the mountains, and the surface of the earth became uninhabitable. In the Bible, it is the Great Flood. In the ancient Sumerian texts, it is the Epic of Gilgamesh. But in the ancient Persian text, the Zend-Avesta, the holy book of Zoroastrianism, the story is slightly different and chillingly relevant. The supreme god, Ahura Mazda, warns the prophet Yima that a catastrophic winter is coming, a global freeze that will destroy all life on the surface. Ahura Mazda commands Yima to build a vara, a multi-leveled underground enclosure. He is told to bring the seeds of all plants, the best of all animals, and the strongest of all humans into this underground city to survive the apocalypse. The text explicitly states that this underground city must have its own artificial light and ventilation. For centuries, historians read the Zend-Avesta as purely mythological. But standing in the third level of Nushabad, feeling the perfectly regulated 65-degree air flowing through the P-shaped shafts, looking at the massive storage chambers meant for grain and livestock, the myth suddenly sounds like a highly accurate historical blueprint. What if Nushabad is a vara? What if these massive tunnels were built by a highly advanced pre-Ice Age civilization that foresaw a cosmic disaster? An asteroid impact, a solar flare, or a pole shift that rendered the surface of the Earth a wasteland? They used technology we cannot comprehend to melt the rock, creating a self-sustaining biosphere deep underground. They waited out the cataclysm. Centuries, maybe millennia later, their descendants emerged, their technology lost to time, reverting to hunter-gatherers, but retaining the mythological memory of the gods who built the underground worlds. And thousands of years after that, during the Sassanid Empire, humans fleeing from invading armies simply stumbled upon these ancient, empty subterranean cities and claimed them as their own, bringing their pottery and their weapons, leaving the very artifacts that confuse modern archaeologists today. The theory sounds like science fiction, but it explains the missing excavated dirt. It explains the acoustic black holes. It explains the impossible fluid dynamics of the ventilation. And it explains why modern scientists, armed with all their PhDs in satellite technology, stand in these tunnels and admit they do not know how they were made. There is another layer to this mystery, one that the local Iranians whisper about but rarely share with Western cameras. In Islamic and pre-Islamic mythology, there exists a race of beings made of smokeless fire who lived on Earth before humanity, the jinn. In local folklore, humans did not dig the deep tunnels. They say the jinn built them. According to the legends, when King Solomon was given dominion over all creatures, he commanded the jinn to use their supernatural strength to carve massive cities into the bedrock of the world to hide his greatest treasures. While science dismisses the jinn as superstition, the local workers who helped clear the rubble from Nushabad often refuse to enter the deepest, unexplored sections of the third level. They claim to hear voices in the acoustic dead zones. They claim to see shadows moving in the absolute dark. They believe that while the surface world belongs to humans, the deep earth still belongs to the ancient builders, and we are trespassing. So, where does this leave us? Today, only a small fraction of the Nushabad complex is open to the public. The Iranian government tightly controls the excavation. Several new tunnel branches discovered branching off toward the distant mountains have been abruptly sealed with concrete, officially due to structural instability. But conspiracy theorists and independent researchers ask, what did they find down there that they had to bury under tons of modern cement? In 2019, rumors leaked from an unauthorized survey team suggesting they found a sealed chamber on the deepest level containing anomalous biological remains, skeletons that were human-like, but with cranial capacities far exceeding ours. Skeletons that matched the bizarre mantis man petroglyphs found in the Zagros Mountains above. Of course, the report was scrubbed from the internet, dismissed as a hoax, and the researchers lost their funding. Iran remains the ultimate sealed archive. It is a country sitting on a tectonic plate of hidden history. The massive tunnels of Nushabad appeared out of nowhere to us only because we had forgotten where to look. They stand as a silent, terrifying testament to the fact that the timeline of human history is not a straight line of constant progress. It is a cycle of rise, catastrophic fall, and amnesia. We look at our skyscrapers of glass and steel and assume we are at the pinnacle of human achievement. But a civilization capable of seamlessly carving a 4-acre, climate-controlled metropolis out of solid bedrock, manipulating acoustics and thermodynamics without electricity, might look at our modern cities and view them as fragile, temporary tents waiting to be blown away by the next cosmic wind. The tunnels are breathing. The ancient ventilation shafts still pull the desert air down into the dark. The underground rivers still flow through the Qanats. The trapdoors still wait on their stone pivots. Nushabad is not a ruin. It is a machine that was simply turned off, waiting to be turned back on. As we continue to scratch the surface of our planet, more of these forbidden passages will inevitably appear out of nowhere. The earth will collapse, and the dark will invite us in. The question is no longer who built them. The question is, if an advanced civilization went to such impossible lengths to hide themselves deep underground, what exactly were they so afraid of? And more importantly, is that threat coming back? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the unknown. If this exploration of Iran's forbidden tunnels made you question the history you were taught, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. We release new documentaries exploring the world's most terrifying and unexplainable mysteries every week. Check out the video on your screen right now to see our investigation into the 12,000-year-old structures in Turkey that are rewriting the timeline of humanity. Until next time, keep your eyes open, and remember, the truth is usually buried deep.